They say Trump was just another controversial politician. But those who observe closely realize something much greater. He transformed global politics into a battlefield of psychological warfare. While leaders sought consensus, he wagered on chaos. While diplomats negotiated in silence, he tweeted loudly, and the world stopped to listen. This is where the paradox was born. A man who promised peace but used fear as his primary tool. The doctrine, shock and awe, once restricted to generals, gained a new interpreter. Trump didn't need bombs to conquer territory. A well-placed phrase, a calculated gesture, or strategic silence was enough. He understood what many still pretend to ignore. The true war of the 21st century is fought in the mind. And in the Middle East, this game reached its apex. A blend of diplomacy and deterrence, spectacle and strategy. The result? The entire planet was divided between admiration and dread. Some called him a visionary, others an incendiary. But no one can deny that he rewrote the rules of global power. And perhaps, by understanding his doctrine, we can decipher not only the recent past, but what lies ahead. Because Trump's shock and awe may have merely changed form, and is still with us. What is shock and awe, and how this doctrine was born? Few people understand that the concept of shock and awe, or shock and awe, wasn't born from political rhetoric, but from a carefully calculated strategy to overwhelm the enemy without prolonged fighting. Created in the 1990s by American military strategists, it argued that true victory came not from bombs, but from mind of the adversary. The objective was simple and brutal, to cause such psychological impact that surrender became the only rational way out. It was the power of fear weaponized. During the 2003 Iraq War, the world saw this doctrine in action for the first time. The live-streamed images of Baghdad lit up by explosions were more than attacks. They were messages. Messages addressed to the entire planet. Resistance is futile. This combination of military power and media spectacle demonstrated that modern warfare was no longer fought solely on the battlefield, but also on screens and in the public eye. Victory depended on narrative. It's curious to note that, over time, this doctrine transcended tanks and missiles. It began to influence the way political leaders, corporations, and even social movements communicate strength and dominance. Shock became synonymous with visibility, awe with control. It was this reasoning that paved the way for a new generation of leaders who understood that true power is not what is imposed through violence, but what is felt before the war even begins. And that's where Trump entered the scene. The Trumpist reinterpretation: power, image, and deterrence. Donald Trump didn't need bombs to provoke shock and awe. A tweet was all it took. His doctrine was built on the idea that fear, doubt, and surprise are as effective as any nuclear arsenal. Instead of missiles, he launched calculated words. Instead of tanks, he used cameras and headlines. He understood that in the 21st century, war is won with image and perception. And in this, he was a master. Trump's strategy was clear: cause chaos so that, amid the confusion, he could seize control of the narrative. Every public appearance, every controversial statement, and every impulsive gesture were part of a precise choreography. He created a tense atmosphere, and while everyone was trying to decipher his next move, he was already 3 moves ahead. Trump played politics like a chess player who, instead of moving pieces, moved crowds through emotion. This tactic, seen as arrogance by some and genius by others, was not limited to domestic politics. On the international stage, he applied the same method of psychological deterrence. He created uncertainty in his enemies and unrest in his allies. One day he threatened North Korea. The next, he declared friendship. This unpredictability was his greatest weapon, and the essence of the modern reinterpretation of shock and awe. But it was in the Middle East that this doctrine found its most explosive stage. The Middle East as a stage: alliances, retaliations, and spectacle. The Middle East has always been the great chessboard where powers test their doctrines, and Trump knew it. From his first day in office, he treated the region as a political and psychological laboratory. There, Every decision carried symbolic weight. Recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital, openly supporting Netanyahu, and isolating Iran were not just diplomatic acts, but calculated moves to trigger chain reactions. It was the shock and awe applied to diplomacy. The use of astonishment as a tool of domination. Every gesture was a message. When Trump ordered the strike that killed Qassem Soleimani, one of Iran's most powerful men, he wasn't just targeting a general. He was targeting global perception. The message was clear. No one is beyond my reach. The psychological impact was immediate. Allies retreated, adversaries rethought strategies, and the world realized that the unpredictable had become routine. The attack was a show of power, but also a message of authority. The U.S. was once again dictating the rules of the game, and, while the dust still rose from the desert, Trump reached out his other hand to seal historic agreements with the same countries that had previously viewed each other as enemies. The Abraham Accords, uniting Israel and Arab nations, were the next chapter in this global drama. It was the height of the paradox, causing chaos and then proposing peace. And the world, stunned, watched the transformation of war into a political spectacle, unaware that the real battlefield was about to shift again. The power of unpredictability, a political and psychological weapon. Trump understood something few leaders dare explore. The fear of the unpredictable is often more powerful than the fear of force. He transformed uncertainty into strategy. He never made it clear whether he would act diplomatically or aggressively, and this uncertainty was, in itself, a weapon. Entire governments lost nights trying to decipher whether a threat on Twitter meant war or mere theater. It was a psychological game on a global scale, and he mastered the game with irony and intuition. The curious thing is that this tactic wasn't born of impulsiveness, as many thought. It was pure calculation. By acting unpredictably, Trump forced his opponents to react, not act, and those who react lose control. It's the logic of poker. The player who keeps their cards secret always has the advantage. This strategy gave him power in negotiations, speeches, and even armed conflicts, because no one knew where the bluff ended and the truth began. This aura of uncertainty redefined the concept of deterrence. Instead of tanks, he used suspense. Instead of troops, time. His weapon was doubt. And in the modern world, doubt corrodes more than fear. Thus, international politics found itself hostage to a new type of leadership, one that played with the collective mind. But there was one field where Trump applied this unpredictability with even greater mastery: the media, where the power to manipulate narratives became as lethal as any bomb. Media, manipulation, and narrative. The new battlefield. Trump understood before anyone else that the media isn't just a vehicle, it's a battlefield. While other leaders feared negative headlines, he used them as ammunition. Every controversy was fuel to keep him in the spotlight, and the more he was criticized, the more powerful he became. He understood the basic principle of the digital age: whoever controls the attention controls the power. And attention, in the 21st century, is worth more than oil. Modern warfare, from his perspective, was fought not just with armies, but with narratives. A primetime speech, a strategic post, or a tense press conference could have more impact than an airstrike. Trump knew how to turn insults into headlines and chaos into prestige. He was the architect of his own controversy. By the time the world was outraged by his words, he had already won the invisible battle, that of relevance. And as the planet was divided between love and hate, it cemented an uncomfortable truth. In the age of hyperconnectivity, whoever dominates the narrative dominates the world. The media was its army, Twitter its field of operations, and every fake news a mass psychological experiment. But this doctrine didn't end on the screen. It continued to echo in alliances, sanctions, and global economies. Shock and awe took on a new form, that of the algorithm. The lasting impact, legacy, and geopolitical consequences. The Trump Doctrine didn't end with his term. It left scars and seeds scattered across the geopolitical map. It changed the way nations communicate, how leaders behave, and even how the population perceives power. After his passing, alliances became more pragmatic, less ideological, and the fear of displeasing the United States once again became a determining factor. Shock and awe became a silent reminder that unpredictability may be the new order. The impact on the economy was equally profound. The manipulation of sanctions, trade tensions, and the repositioning of global supply chains forced the world to recognize a new dynamic. Power isn't just about having money, but about dictating the rules of how it circulates. Trump shifted the axis of global trade, strengthened the dollar as a political weapon, and demonstrated that financial warfare can be as devastating as military warfare. America First became more than a slogan. It became an economic doctrine with global echoes. And on the international stage, the legacy was ambiguous. For some, it restored American prominence. For others, it left the world more unstable and fragmented. But no one can deny, it redefined modern warfare. It replaced trenches with screens, armies with speeches, and diplomacy with spectacle. And as the world tries to understand what remains of this era, a new question begins to emerge. Shock and awe Trump's end? Or has it simply changed shape, evolving into the most unpredictable field of all? Digital. The future of shock and awe. From the battlefield to social media, the world has discovered that the new battlefield no longer has borders, uniformed armies, or physical trenches. It's on social media. Today's shock and awe comes in the form of viral videos, disinformation campaigns, and algorithmic manipulation. Fear has been digitized, and as in ancient wars, the objective remains the same: dominate the mind before dominating the territory. The enemy is now invisible, and the weapon is attention. Every notification on your phone is a microdose of psychological impact. Infinite scrolling has replaced sirens. Attacks come not with missiles, but with memes. It's a war waged for influence, where the first to gain engagement wins the battle. The Trump Doctrine was the prelude to this new era. It showed that a leader can govern, provoke, and mobilize millions with words alone, and that chaos can be the most effective strategy of all. Today, governments, corporations, and movements have learned from him and are applying the same tactic on a global scale. Shock and awe has become the language of power, translated into trending topics, polarized discourse, and emotional manipulation. We are facing a war that doesn't need blood to leave wounds, and perhaps the greatest danger lies not in the next armed conflict, but in the next viral event. Because in the end, whoever controls fear controls the world. Do you see how all this isn't just a distant theory, but a practical guide to reading the world? Starting today, try observing headlines like you're analyzing a chessboard. Who gained attention? Who lost the narrative? Who used shock to instill fear? Write down 3 events from the week and describe, in one sentence, the psychological message behind them. If you do this for 30 days, you'll develop a radar that few possess, one that separates the average viewer from the strategist. Now tell me, are you reacting to the news or learning to decode it? What changes in your life when you understand that attention is power, and that power ultimately dictates prices, votes, and peace? If you want a concrete step, define a smart information diet today. Reliable sources, limited consumption times, and a notebook of insights. With each news item, ask, what fear was triggered, what belief was reinforced, and who benefited from it? If this content made sense, I dare you to make a direct invitation. Download the ebook 10 Signs That a War is About to Start. It's your quick guide to identifying, in everyday life, the triggers that precede geopolitical, economic, and informational conflicts. The link is in the description pinned comment. And of course, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to continue receiving analyses that go beyond the obvious and put you one step ahead. Are you up for this next level?